Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. I am Scott Mathias from NCEA, and I will be your host today. Just a few housekeeping notes as people are joining. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A or chat windows. We will be monitoring the questions and we'll try to answer them all in the allotted time. After today's webinar, I will email everyone a link to the recording, as well as an online survey. Once you fill out the survey, a certificate of completion for the webinar will be emailed to you. Today's webinar, Why Behavioral Health Management is the Key to Unlocking Performance, is being led by Dr. Rich Gilman, President of Terrace Metrics, and Jill Loneman, Principal of St. Pius X School in Edgewood, Kentucky. Before I turn it over to our panelists, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God our Father, you sent St. Patrick to preach your glory to the people of Ireland. By the help of his prayers, may all Christians proclaim your love throughout the world. Grant this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Rich and Jill, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been an honor. And we'll take it from here. So thank you all. And Jill, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Sure. We're working on our camera, so sorry.
That's okay. I'll take it all off of us and we'll do a share screen with our slides. And
Perfect.
And I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Rich Gilman. I am the president and the co-founder of Terrace Metrics. We're very honored to be spending an hour with you to talk about Terrace Metrics, why it's important, how it's being used in our schools and the NCEA schools. And we're very honored to have Mrs. Loneman, Jill Loneman, as to testify or provide testimony of how it's being used in the school. So rather than me trying to sell it to you, you're actually also going to get a perspective of one of our long-term partners. And Jill, please feel to come on in anytime you'd like. Also, for those of you who are online now, who are live, please feel free to ask any questions that you want. We're going to answer all of these. Whether you have concerns, whether you need further clarification, don't hold back. Let us know by just putting it in your chat. It's being moderated and we'll answer all of those. The whole idea of what we are doing around Terrace Metrics is really in keeping with the NCEA. We are so proud to be a sponsor of NCEA. Please look for us in the upcoming conference, of course, in New Orleans. We will be there. We have a nice booth there. We'd love to see you. But the thing that always appealed to me about NCEA is the vision it's had. Of course, it's creating vibrant Catholic schools that transform lives and by extension, society. That's very important for me. As a licensed psychologist in many states, the reason that I'm that is because I spent 30 years in academic institutions as a tenured professor, Georgia State University of Kentucky, University of Cincinnati Medical School. I'm a school psychologist by training, so I have one foot firmly planted in mental health. I have one foot firmly planted in the education. I'm a fellow of the American Psychological Association. I'm a fellow of multiple other organizations as well. I'm a key member, or I would say maybe a founding member of the whole CASEL standards and the reasons why we created that. But what I wanted to do in 2018 is to move away from my career. So I gave my career up to start this company, along with others who've joined us. And please feel free to go to our website, terracemetrics.org, and you can see who's on our team and who our advisory committee is, which is really some of the most eminent individuals, researchers in America. What we're looking for is answers to these questions that I actually sat down with many schools across the United States in 2018, when I decided to step away from my career, I wanted to do something different. And this is the questions I asked. It wasn't just public schools, it's parochial schools, independent schools. I asked the same questions. These are the questions I had. First of all, how do you know your students are doing well? Who are you relying on? And obviously, it's very difficult to get information as students get older. They tend to keep it themselves. So we have to wait, we have to kind of rely on our parents telling this, or maybe teachers. And most of the time, we're very good at that. Sometimes as students start to struggle with some forms of adversity, It's very difficult for them to share that with us. Usually if we ask them, and as a parent, I do this myself, how are you doing? We get the perfunctory fine. That may not necessarily be the case. And so I wanted to know for schools, how are you determining students that are doing really well versus students who are really struggling? Not academically, that's part of it, but just overall. The second thing I wanted to do is if you are doing something, what do you have choices in this? Or is this some company is kind of like thrusting indicators at you and you have to use that? I wanted to know your data privacy laws. For example, do these companies conform to all privacy laws? Is this data confidential and secure? As a parent myself, I want to know, are parents directly involved in this process? Is this data immediately delivered back to a small team that's fully trained by us to respond? Is the data itself tied to frameworks that many schools have, like the MTSS model? All of these questions, unfortunately, were no. And it's still unfortunate in 2022, most of these questions are no, with the exception of what we are doing. We're the only company that's saying yes to all of these questions in managing and monitoring behavioral health of all of our students. But it goes beyond just students. We also have an employee version. And that's the other question I was having. Even in 2018, this is well before the pandemic, employees of schools, regardless of settings, but especially in small schools with relatively few resources, they can be under a tremendous degree of distress or stress, and sometimes they may not even know that. So one of the questions I also asked is, how do employees know their own behavioral health? Is there such a mechanism that's being offered to employees that allows them to do this free of anybody knowing except them only? They would have access to the data. They would choose the indicators that they want. They are able to measure and monitor their own behavioral health over time. And it's not just an assessment. Is it tied to things that they can improve their own behavioral health if they want? Unfortunately, just like the school version, there was nothing out there for the employee version. So we set out in 2018 to do this, but yet we know this idea of behavioral health, the crisis grows in 2021. And this is kind of a tip of the iceberg, by the way. 1 in 5 students and essentially 1 in 5 employees are facing significant adversity. It doesn't have to be diagnosable. It doesn't have to be something that's like insurmountable, but it's adversity nonetheless. And if it's adversity, it's interfering. And if it's interfering with things like schooling, workplace productivity, among others. Here's the issue, though. That's, again, the tip of the iceberg, because for every student, let's stick with students now, who's identified through normal processes, 2 to 3 go undetected, and they will continue to struggle in silence. And in fact, they will continue to struggle in silence all the way through their schooling without us really knowing. And I'll walk you through the reasons why, but more importantly, there is a huge trajectory of what happens with students who are struggling behavioral health wise in school and what happens outside after graduation, both in terms of career and personal choices, among other things. And yet there's really no way to give something that's very simple that leverages resources in the schools to help those students to go beyond just casting a net and maybe catching a couple of students who are struggling when many go undetected. Now the problem continues to go without any interventions. This is our own data. And as you can see on the note, low here, this data is following over 4,500 high school students and 6,000 middle school students. That's including NCEA schools. So this is everybody together. And this is what we know. This is first time that schools use this. This is just the first time. So in 2019, this is comprising of students of schools who used it for the first time. 2020, schools who are using it for the first time in 2021. So this, I'm looking at the high school levels, and around the 3 biggest predictors of the reason why they're not performing as well as they can in schools, and that would be anxiety, ostracism, not connecting with anyone, and of course, depression. And the measures that we use are the same measures that are used in clinics, believe it or not. If this is never meant to be used as a diagnostic tool, it's information gathering. But the same measures that we use at Terrace Metrics are the same measures they use in the clinic. And the threshold for anxiety and depression is 8. This is a collective group of students, just regular students. And as you can see in 2019, when they schools first used this, 2020, 2021, those are above almost that threshold of 8. And 8 means that if a student had come to me with that score, as a clinician, I would have said, let's get you some interventions to help you. So collectively speaking, that's pretty high for our students. This was right at pandemic and now throughout, hasn't changed. Not only in our high school students, but also our middle school students. The ostracism, that is the biggest predictor of distress. Depression and anxiety, kind of downstream effects. If I'm not feeling like I belong, that's leading to a whole nother level of distress. And the cut point there is 2. So students, collectively speaking, are above 2 for first-time schools that are using this. And that's very important to see, because you're going to see what's going to happen for schools who use our system and how these scores decrease, not just here, but it's not just students, it's also our educators. We know this. Especially in 2019, Gallup did a poll. What they found is that almost half of our educators and employees, they don't have to be teachers, they could be your lunchroom monitors, school bus drivers, it doesn't matter. Collectively speaking, almost half are experiencing some form of behavioral health issues. Not diagnosable, but nonetheless, they're stressful enough. This is one of the highest rates among all professionals. The Gallup found that the stress level of our educators is no different than emergency room nurses. That's really high. Here's the thing, up to 70%, they don't even know. They're struggling, and they're struggling in silence. They don't even know their behavioral health. So we wanted to create a system that was essentially 2 systems, one for our students, one for our workforce. I'm going to be focusing on our students for the next 15 minutes to kind of give you an overview of why we're doing this in schools. And that is, when I stepped down in 2018, we still do this. The schools are we're kind of relying on a reactive model. That's no different than 70 years ago. If we were to go back in time, we would be no different. We're waiting for a problem to come to our attention. What the data shows, what the research shows, is that the average time it takes for a problem that first emerges to when it is actually brought to our attention, sometimes through parents, sometimes through teachers, is a decade. That's a decade. What that means is that while we are waiting, for many of these problems, they become more intractable, certainly more expensive to treat. Wouldn't it be great if we could create a proactive model so that we could reach out to problems as they're just first emerging? That way it's much easier. The other thing that we know is that in our schools, we have resources in our schools. Are they a lot? Maybe not. I mean, there's a lot of parochial schools, and you might be one where you might have a traveling counselor come every other week, but it's a resource nonetheless. In many schools, you have those resources available, whether it's a counselor, or maybe a school psychologist, or maybe a social worker. You're lucky if you have a nurse, but if you have that, but the thing about that is there's oftentimes a line drawn between those resources and the administration, right? And so if there's a line drawn between information sharing between that, there's definitely a line drawn between the school and the community around behavioral health. We wanted to get rid of those lines. But the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to create a framework where everyone is working together tightly. And that is what we are working on. That's what we've done. And I want to say I'm very proud of what we've done. We perfected this process for schools to use. They leverage their existing resources. They may partner with community resources, but we want to make sure that you use the existing resources. So it's not an expensive thing. And what we are using is behavioral health. Now, behavioral health is really based on resiliency science. And resiliency science says this: if I've got personal strengths at high enough levels and I've got social supports around me, then it doesn't matter what the adversity is that I'm facing, I'm more successfully able to work through or overcome. It's when those strengths or those supports are not at a high level, maybe they're eroding, maybe they're no longer there, that's when adversity starts rearing its ugly head. And so for that reason, what we want to do is we have to look at both sides. That's behavioral health. Behavioral health is looking at those strengths, but also looking if adversity exists. And if it's existing, what are the resources we can offer to students and as well as parents to make sure that we can promote that behavioral health. Now, why that's important is that behavioral health, collectively speaking, behavioral health is nothing more than this: how a student sees themselves, sees their world, and sees their future. That's behavioral health. If we can capture that, that explains up to half of the variance associated with academic functioning. In other words, let's just take away mastery of content, right? I've got a curriculum, I'm learning math, that's wonderful. Let's remove that. The second biggest predictor of how well I'm doing is behavioral health. And we forget about that, but that's the big thing. And that we're not very good at schools to do that. We also know this, and this is why it's so important. If we can improve students' behavioral health, we improve their academic progress. It doesn't go the other way. Just because I improve, I'm learning math, that's not improving my behavioral health. It's the other way around. And by doing that, you actually see effect size differences much faster. They grow academically much better. And so that is why we wanted to create a system, an evidence-based system that allows schools, regardless of resources, to measure, monitor, and manage the behavioral health of all students, as well as we have a separate one for the employees as well. We are all over. And so we started in Northern Kentucky in 2018 with just 4 districts. We're now nationwide. We're serving some of the largest districts in America. We serve some of the most remote systems in America. We serve Catholic institutions that have very little resources, and yet the process works the same. And that is what we're very proud of. We wanted to create something that's user-friendly, that allows schools to leverage the resources that they have, work with community partners as well, but to do it in such a way that it does not blow budgets. So here's what I'm going to show you. We're the only one in America that's doing what we're doing. And yet some schools see other companies as maybe competitors, which we don't, but oftentimes they have to make a decision. And so I just want to compare against 2 that are, I guess, competitors. And you'll see what we offer is what they offer and much more for significantly less. Then that $450 is everything included. We do not have tiered modeling. We don't have hidden charges. We don't have anything like that. It's you get everything. You have unlimited use of the system. You have access to all of our resources, including a tier 1, tier 2 curriculum, which we will train you, workshops and trainings, among others. All that's part of the price. For schools who want to use this prior to next year, it's $3 a student. So we'll give you that as well. So it's just something to consider. We want to conform with all best practices. So one of the things that we are very proud of is that we're the only company that publishes our validity data online. And you're welcome to just look at it, go online, and you can download our white papers. It's easy to use, it's highly useful, and it's also comprehensive. Yes, the indicators, some of the indicators we have, our resiliency indicators, they all conform to CASEL standards. If you're familiar with the CASEL, all conform. We want to make sure that you have data that best informs how tier 1 services, because that's the least expensive, but the one that gets the greatest approach, because that's your preventative. But we also want to make sure that you have data that helps you understand what group of students is struggling, so we can really focus on them to promote their behavioral health, and even tier 3 services. The features is it's all turnkey. You don't have to create anything. We've done it for you. We've created all the parent consents. Parents have to provide consent. We provide all of that. We provide all of the training. All of the training is specific to a team of individuals in the school, and it's not teachers. What it is, it's your counselors, members of your administrations. If you have a school psychologist or social worker nurse, they'll be part of that team, and they're the ones that get extensively trained. So teachers do not have access to the individual data collection. They will be part of this in terms of delivering a curriculum if they want, but they're not going to see the individual data of the student. It's fast. It's done in a classroom. Students basically, they receive a link through their email. That's one way of doing it. And that's like a hit of a button. And that student who's decided to take it that day and that time just receives the link. They click on it. And regardless of their age, their language ability, their reading ability, they're able to complete this in 15 minutes. This also involves parents. So immediately when the students' results come back to that team, a parent report is also generated. It's not sent to the community or to the parents. That's up to the team to decide when to send it. But parents are going to know the behavioral health of their student. That's a very important thing, because that's what makes us very unique from any of the other companies that are out there. We have a lot of unique features in our system. Most importantly, these on the right-hand side are the indicators that are chosen by the school. Now, it depends on the grade, but this is up for the schools to decide what indicators that they choose for that particular group of students. And it could be flexible, right? So for example, in the 7th grade, the choice of indicators, regardless of whether it's resiliency or maybe forms of risk, They choose, and they get to choose that, and it could be different from an 8th grader. Parents have the right to see the items that comprise each one of these indicators. So we want them to come to the school to see the items under a member of the team, but they have every right to look at these items. And they're going to find that these items are not intrusive. These items don't ask deep probing questions. That's not what this is for, but they're highly predictive to academic outcomes, which I'll show. The workplace version, it's a little bit different, but it's up to the workplace to determine what indicators should they want for the workplace. And this is how it works for the employees. They receive a link directly from Terrace Metrics. It does not come from their school. It comes directly from Terrace Metrics. They click on a link. They can take this anytime, any place, anywhere. And then at the end of 10 minutes, they're going to be able to see their own results. And it's interactive. Their results are online, and they can click on any indicator to get additional resources like videos and a self-guided curriculum. So it's directly, the only person who can see the data is the employee themselves. The employer has no idea. And that's the important thing. For schools, the data that comes back is going to be generated into several reports. Those reports are tied to a tier 1 or a tier 2 curriculum for schools, which we do the training. There's also a separate parent and teacher rating system as well. I'm going to turn it over to Jill about their experiences, but I do want to say overall, this is what we do, because every 6 months we have customer satisfaction. I don't want to sound like JD Power here, but we're very high. We're one of, I can't think of any other company that doesn't have has as high of overall customer satisfaction ratings, but we also have one of the highest retention rates. We do not lose schools. Schools stay with us because they trust us, and that's the key for us. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Loneman, about your experiences. Please feel free to say anything you like.
Okay, well, we are in our 4th year using Terrace Metrics, and it's been a very positive experience for us all around. Rich and Dale were very good about coming out, speaking to the teachers at a faculty meeting, so they knew what this whole Terrace Metrics thing was and what the purpose of it was and where we were going with it. Also, Rich came out and spoke to parents who wanted more information or felt a little unsure about the survey, what the underlying reason for having it was. They were worried about what the questions asked, and Rich was very good about explaining to them that the questions themselves are not invasive, and they're not, there's not an underlying agenda to them. Betsy and I were very, very picky about that. We wanted to make sure that the questions were aligned with the Catholic Church teachings, and just to make sure that the secular society wasn't being brought in any way, in a negative way. So we did our research, very, very happy with Rich and Dale and the transparency, very, very happy with the resources they provided. When you decide to do it, what's the next step? How am I going to implement it in the school? What are the nuts and bolts for implementation? Importing student data. They were with us every step of the way there. Letters were great, parent letters, consent forms. You can decide if you're going to do an opt-out, active or passive participation. Everything is there online for you. You do not have to, basically, you don't have to generate anything. It's right there. The day of the test, we had people here the first time we gave it to make sure everything ran smoothly. Any questions after the test has been taken, or the assessment, I call it test, assessment has been taken, they're available right then, right there to help in any way. As far as the assessment, the amount of time it takes, 15 minutes max to take. And there are questions built in to make sure kids aren't doing a rapid guess or a rapid answering of questions, and that they're actually paying attention to what they are answering. I love this. You just put up a report, and this is what you get for each child once they take the test. There's certain people who have access. On our team, it's myself, my assistant principal, Betsy Greenwell, and the school counselor. as far as individual reports. You decide who is going to be given, access to the information. And of course, the parents. So the parents get results as soon as they are available. What you can see here, they have the resiliency and the risk factors. Resiliency, we have a lot more of those depending on the grade. We administer this in grades 5 through 8. And it's something that travels with them into the diocesan high schools to kind of see where they are with those and in developing those. We also generate class reports so we can see trends across classes, and we do it across grade levels. Then the counselor and Betsy and I meet and we talk about where are the trends. The first year we did it, we noticed a trend in lack of grit with our kids. So then the following year, we did a lot of in-services for our teachers on what grit looks like. How do you build that in kids? It was right there on your site. We also chose a book that we did as a common read for our parents and explained that this was directly tied back to the results received from the Terrace Metrics SEL. We were actually, it was the book by Jessica Leahy, The Gift of Failure. We actually had an evening plan, but then COVID started for our final culminating activity. It was soup and kind of like a soup for the soul evening, where we were going to come back together and discuss in small groups and then large group what we got out of the book. And so this is easy to administer. Results are easy to read. You have to be a doctor of any science to understand what your strengths are, what your risk factors are. And then you have a plethora of resources for the teacher, for the parent, for the administrator to use in the school based on your scores.
And then our whole mission is the discipline for life for children. So spiritually, academically, and personally. And so this touches upon that third pillar. So we have these 3 pillars that we focus on. And this very concretely, years ago, if you thought that you, talking about mental health, so like for my father, he's 95, and even in the 80s, and the people in the 70s, there was kind of an uncomfortableness with discussing mental health. I know, like, my dad didn't find out that he had OCD until my mom was brave enough to get my brother diagnosed with it. And so, like, through that, my dad had great healing in the later years of his life. So now that's not the case with parents. Parents are readily wanting this information, and it's a report card. So I know, like what Rich said, if you're growing in academics, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're progressing along in the personal pillar. But if you are progressing along in this arena, and we've seen this with COVID and the isolation, and we're doing a whole thing with technology right now, no tech Tuesdays in our diocese to take away to temper technology for our kids, because there's a direct correlation between technology, social media, and depression,
right?
Ostracism. And so they are eager, like, give us more. And the diocese recently put out on these No Tech Tuesdays, there were articles and various things to follow. So,
right, in the messenger, which
in
is
the messenger, and to
paper.
parents, and with us doing this No Tech Tuesday, but like, all of this stuff comes from them seeing firsthand these report cards.
Yep.
Because everybody wants a report card. And I will tell you that in life, like going through life, you realize that, grades become so secondary in the success of a person. It is so much more than that. And so I think this is something that is really, it's pivotal. It's invaluable. It's kind of like an aha moment, like Rich said. One thing I will tell you, we were very particular about the questions because I don't want my kids to be guided in a way that's not, the parents would not be comfortable with them answering questions. So the questions are written in ways that we can get valuable information, but they're not digging deep into things that the kids may share that the parents may not be comfortable for, and they're not leading questions to areas that we're not comfortable leading to in our Catholic arena. So I will tell you, we take that very seriously because our Catholic identity is very important to us. So when we look at programs like this, that I really have great confidence in the process of that.
I agree. And one other thing I wanted to say too, it's affordable. We had to run this through the diocesan office. And at the time, everybody at that time was using the ACT behavioral assessment, which I find very, very expensive. And it does not give half the information that this affordable assessment does. And it's so easy to take. So we're very, very happy with it. The next part of your assessment, Rich, that we are going to implement next year is the faculty assessment for teachers. This year, we were in school throughout the entire COVID process, except for that initial springtime where we had to go to NTI. The following year, we went back full time. But last December, our governor shut us down and made everybody go to NTI. But other than that, we were in school. But what we found is this year, our teachers are completely spent. They're emotionally drained. So I love that you're talking about that more. We're going to implement this at the beginning of the year at a back to school PD for them, and then offer the resources and show them, what's out there for them to support them in another way.
And then with the report card, I think as a parent, sometimes like looking at my own children, I have 5 children, 16 to 26, and I would appreciate to see the strengths on it.
Yes.
Like I would celebrate that. So it wouldn't just be about looking for weaknesses, because really our greatest strength and sometimes our biggest weakness can be one and the same. But it's like saying, gosh, I can celebrate this. So when I say it's a report card, it does give you the opportunity to look at a child that could be very healthy from a mental health standpoint and celebrate that. And I think parents need that as well. We're not just trying to diagnose all these kids as being unhealthy. We can celebrate the things that we see in our children that are going well. And the average parent who may not be seeing any mental health problems is going to appreciate that.
Which brings me to the next point I would like to make. When we first gave this test, when we were given the data, kids took it. I had a few who were designated as at risk, and specifically in self-harm. So right away we called Rich, because some of these kids were not on my radar at all. Some I expected to be there because I had a relationship with the parents and we knew that they were in therapy, but some were not on my radar. They were getting good grades. On the outside, I thought they were doing very, very well. Those parents, when I called them, the self-harm flag, when I called them, each of their parents were not shocked. They were aware, yes, my child's in therapy. No, I did not tell the school because I didn't think it would impact them. But it also gave another layer of validity to the parent, to us, that this is picking up kids that we never would have suspected until later on. So it kudos.
Thank you. Thank you. The check's in the mail. No, this has been unvarnished and we really appreciate it. As we were showing, as you were discussing, the information goes back to that team immediately. Once the student is done, the report is sent. And by the way, this is based on feedback from our schools. So the beautiful thing about also joining Terrace Metrics, you're part of a larger network. And we want to make sure that we're addressing the needs. Even the look of the report is based on the feedback of the schools. And if they tell us that they want something that needs to be in the system in order to make this even more efficient for them, we put it in. So we're already in our second round of changes. They're minor changes, but that's what the school wants. And so that's the beautiful thing. It's all iterative. When this report is generated, again, only that team sees it, they see it immediately. And it's along this behavioral health continuum. Behavioral health is like physical health. There's no yes or no, it's a continuum. And the first thing you'll see here, and this is part of the training, is that you'll see how Frosty Snowman is doing in time one, that's baseline. Moderate concern means, okay, Frosty's got some strengths, thank goodness, but he's also got some areas that he's struggling with. Now you know what those areas are. You also know the items that were endorsed so that you can get the information and the resources to Frosty to improve specifically these two so that you can improve the behavioral health. The parent also gets the report when it's sent by the school, but that parent report is immediately generated too. And it's almost the same. They get the same color codes. There's a much better preamble in the report, but it's interactive. So if this is sent to the parents, they can simply click on whatever indicator that they're interested in, and that's going to go to a series of videos and other resources to help them understand, okay, my child is low in ostracism. I don't even know what ostracism means. These videos describe this is what ostracism is, and this is what you can promote. This is what you can do to promote social connections at home. And it's never finger pointing. It's always how do we work together? And out of curiosity, Ms. Loneman, any feedback on the reports themselves from the parents?
We have had parents use them. The first year we did not get a whole lot of feedback, but in the last few years we have. I think it's just because it's getting the information out there, what this is, and they're a little more used to the report, but they say they're using them. The teachers really like them. But like anything else, it's initiated typically by the counselor saying, hey, if you have a high incidence of this, then this is what I want you to do, because teachers just want to give it to them. They don't want to have to go search for anything. We do a lot of we give this information at faculty meetings, but then we break it down into our professional learning communities at the grade level meetings, where the counselor will go in and go over the grade level report and then individual class reports. And then she makes suggestions of what they should be focusing on in the classroom.
That's wonderful. So when all the students are done, the school is able to retrieve their school report. And this could be broken down in numbers. This could be grade level reports, 6th, 7th, 8th, for example, or collectively. And by the way, everything that we're discussing, it's historical. So once the student continues to take it, you're going to be able to compare where that student is now versus the last time they took it. That's also
Right.
in the parent report. It's also embedded in the school report. And in this case, let's say that this is the first time that a school has used it. You're automatically, first thing you're going to see is collectively, what is the behavioral health of this school or of this group? And you'll know exactly who's in the at-risk range. Remember, at-risk means that they don't really have a lot of strengths and they're really struggling. Now you know who those students are. 39% that's that emerging issues. And that's now you know which of these students and who they are, that they're starting to slip a little. The whole goal is to get them to move this way. And how you do that is through targeting key indicators, which are also part of the report. So what indicator should we be targeting on, either through tier 1 or tier 2 interventions to promote collectively the behavioral health? And that's what part of this report is also, is allowing schools to understand what should we be targeting for the next 2 or 3 months, so that when we do this again as a school-wide screener, we're going to be able to measure response to interventions. We are not an assessment company, we are a system. So our data is directly tied to a tier 1 and a tier 2 curriculum. So it could be addressed either in the classroom level as a tier 1. Let's say, for instance, 30% of our students in this group is really low in global satisfaction. So we have a tier 1 intervention, tier 1 curriculum that could be used for teacher volunteers to deliver it in the classroom. And then, or let's just get those 30% and do a tier 2 intervention. And then we have a separate curriculum for them. And that's usually led by a member of the response team. Your questions may be and should be, well, okay, this is all nice, but what does this mean for academic outcomes? So every 2 years, what we do is we collect data. Schools don't give us their academic information. We don't know who these students are. By the way, we are FERPA. We can't even see the students' data without permission. So we can't see data. But what we do is we match based on student ID number. And so this is the fall of 2019 of 27,000 randomly selected students from grades 3 through 12. And in that fall, we were able to see where they were along the continuum against their actual school and behavioral outcomes. And it makes sense. We can't call ourselves a company like we are if at least somebody in the at-risk range, collectively speaking, has a significantly lower GPA than somebody in the optimal range, right? That's validity. Here's the thing. All of these mean scores are significantly different from each other. So even in the fall of 2019, even if I was in the satisfactory range, I got a great GPA collectively, but it's not as high as if I was in the optimal range. So that's the beauty of this. Now, this is a cross-sectional data, and the criticism of this is, well, how do we know what leads to what? Maybe by improving their GPA, they improve their behavioral health. Well, what we're finding is that over 5 years of all of our data, this is how we know that behavioral health improvements lead to academic outcomes, is that as students move upward in this continuum, for every step upward, GPA increases by an average of 15%, and state standardized test scores increase around 9%. And you have a significantly decreased rates of school uglies. So that's why we know behavioral health precedes academic progress. You now have the mechanisms and the resources in place to not only identify students, but to move them. And that's the beauty of the system. I'm going to give you an example of one. And this is a district that's about 6,500 students. And this is a district of many districts that use it. I'm just giving you this as an example. When schools use this for the first time, you typically will have more reds and oranges. And it's simply because you've identified those students who have that up to this point have been struggling in silence, but now you know who those students are. And when you do this again 4 months later, that's after you've identified the students, get them the resources, do tier 1 interventions that we help you with. We provide that training. This is what you typically see. You see a decrease in the reds and the oranges. You see an improvements in the greens, which is pretty, but more importantly, for these students who have been identified in the baseline data, over half of them met their targeted math, and reading goals in 6 months. That's the biggest effect size jump. It's not magic. You're just using data you hadn't had before. We also save schools a lot of money. So for example, for many schools, budgets are tied to how many students are coming to us, right? How many students are sitting in our classrooms? Well, chronic absenteeism is one. And chronic absenteeism, and that's usually into the tune of a lot of days missing. And 70% of the reasons why students don't come to school, it's not because they can't master the material, it's a behavioral health issue. And so we know that not every student who's chronically absenteeism is along the behavioral health continuum. Most of the time, chronic absenteeisms are for those students in the at-risk range, to the tune of on average 15 days. 15 days are not coming to school. Schools that use our system for the first year alone, they increase the number of days of those students by 9 days. So they stay in class more often. And more importantly, we think about these, what we call tier 3 services, these really intense individualized. Well, because we've had to wait so long to now, by the time the students come to us, it's usually a tier 3 kind of a thing. But for now, schools have information that allows them to address, tier 1 and tier 2. And schools that use our system reduce the need for tier 3 services, which are very expensive, both for parents as well as schools, by 30%. Now the problems can be addressed through data. This is the schools that used us at time 1, and we've monitored these same students now over this next 2 years. By the way, this is even during the pandemic. So we're talking about here, the high schools and the middle schools. Remember that collective number really high? Look how far it goes down. And it's simply because schools are using this data to help those students who are struggling, but also using this data to identify students who are doing really well, because we can use that data as well. Finally, improvements are just not among the students. So for employees who use this, this is by the way, I'm sorry, this one should be 2020. This is collectively, I can't remember how many, it's over 5,000 employees across the United States, but these are all educators. This is just the educator data. And so remember, as I've said, the anxiety and the depression, 8 is really high. 8 means you're likely going to have some interventions. This is collectively what was reported by teachers, by educators, administrators, what have you, in 2020. And they continue to use our system over time, using our resources and others. And you'll see what happens in 2021. It significantly decreases not only on the anxiety and the depression, but also on the ostracism. It goes really high to below threshold. And that's so both systems are very profound, very helpful, not only to inform what students are doing, but also how employees are taking care of their own behavioral health. So I'm going to turn it back over, if you don't mind, Ms. Loneman, to kind of talk a little bit about how it's been received by the community, by parents, among other things, in terms of stickiness. So we don't lose districts. And one of the reasons why we know that is because parents really embrace this too. That's usually a concern that many schools have before they use this, is how is this going to be taken by the parents? I'd love to have your insight on that.
You know, I was anticipating the first time we rolled this out that I'd get a lot of parents with hesitation. We didn't really see that. That's why we had planned an evening informational session with you. We had sent letters out explaining it. The one thing I think we assumed is that it was kind of a one-time, go ahead, have you come out, and then they'd be fine with it. But now that we're in our 4th, 5th year, we're going to go ahead next year and do parent information nights. And what that looks like, and one of the things we like is that we love these Zoom meetings. Maybe we tape it and we can do it that way to hit more people. Our community likes that in-person Q&A, but really that first time you were at that meeting, maybe 25 people showed up to ask questions. And then once we administered it, every parent that I called who was that self-harm or at risk, the red, they were very open to it.
And we're in a community, we have 733 kids, okay? So it's a big school, K-8, but we're in a community made up of professionals and people that really take their job as primary educator of their children seriously. So they're highly involved. It's their greatest strength. It can be sometimes our biggest challenge. But honestly, they really take everything we send home and they're looking over everything because they are in it 100%. Right. So we were kind of impressed that we didn't have to navigate through more challenges with that
and sell it to them.
I'm telling you, I think it's a generation that is comfortable in these arenas, are more comfortable than parents were even 10 years out.
Yes, I agree. So it's been great. When we gave it this year in the fall, we had parents, I was just at a fundraiser and they asked me, when are we getting that assessment again? We want to see what strengths our kids have developed over the course of the year. As we get further out of COVID, what are their strengths? So, and are those coming back as we diligently focus on those? So.
And then when we make decisions, like we pick a book, we always do common reads for the parents. So if we pick The Gift of Failure, or this past year, we picked The Temperament God Gave Your Child by the Bennetts, which is known in the Catholic arenas. And it's kind of like taking a, what's like a secular besides the temperament?
It's like the Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs. It's for kids, but it's to understand how your children have been given certain temperaments naturally, and they're going to respond in different ways, and they're going to have strengths and weaknesses based on those temperaments. And we did that because it flows right along with this assessment. Our whole goal is to build the whole child and to see that sometimes they're going to respond in certain ways, good or bad, because of this temperament that they've been given, whether they're sanguine, whether they're phlegmatic, whether they're choleric. And the parents appreciate that. So when we give them these common reads, we speak to this assessment because we have proof that it's necessary and that we have a common goal that we're targeting. We have an objective. We have a mental health objective. You know, you have instructional objectives. Well, this is our third pillar, personal.
Objective.
And obviously this goes along with our faith and it goes along with our academics because it enhances all of those things. You know,
Right.
we can tap into the trust that we put in God as part of our mental health,
I agree.
which this assessment does not counter that in any way. If anything, we can use it to support
Right.
that endeavor.
It gives us all a common starting point. And our community wants to know where we're headed, how it fits in. They want transparency and they want to know what we're going to do when we get the results. And we got it all. So it's definitely a part of the culture now here.
One of the things is we do this nationwide. I just came back from Kansas with some parochial schools there to do their parents. So we also do parent workshops as well. So as they get the information, many parents are like, is my child the only one low in hope? No, not at all. So we'll have a parent hope group, and it is how do you promote hope beyond the resources you have? So that's something else we offer. Again, it's part of the price. We don't, we don't charge extra for these.
Mhm.
So I can't thank you enough for your perspective. We've given you an overview, and it's very, of course, trying to get everything in a very hopefully we've done justice to this, but I wanted to open up to the audience now for any questions that you have, not just to me, but of course, to St. Pius, for example, who have been one of our oldest partners. And Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window or in the chat. Either is fine, and I will read off the questions as they come in. We did have the one question. I don't know if you saw it, Jill. It wasn't really a question, but which diocese you're from, and it's Covington, Kentucky, right?
The Diocese of Covington.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
We're very fortunate to cover all schools under the diocese. No, it's grades 3 through 12.
Okay. No,
Our school? I can't see the questions.
Yeah, the
No.
The question was, is it only for grades 5 through 8?
oh,
No,
we give the assessment.
Yeah. The difference is, and by the way, we have a separate parent teacher rating system that will take the system down to pre-K. And what it is of course, when you get young, it's very difficult to have measures that are valid for such young children. So that's why it's grade 3, that's 8, right? But you can use the parent teacher rating system as kind of a proxy of a child's behavioral health. And how many schools use it is they use the parent teacher system for pre-K up to 3, and then they may use this to supplement the information that they're collecting from grades 3 through 12. 3 through 5 get a more truncated version of the indicators offered for them. Grades 6 through 12 get the full array of indicators. So there's a difference there. There's a difference in norms, in the wording of the items. We have emojis for younger students so they can kind of understand the distinction between moderately agree versus mildly agree. So we think through a lot of this, and this is all based on schools too.
Okay, any other questions?
While you're thinking, I should also say that there's things in the system itself. You have slow or poor readers that can wear headphones, it'll be read to them. The other thing is that if you have ESL students, they click a button, it's immediately translated in different languages. And that's also goes for the parent report too. They can get it, click a button, it'll be translated into their language.
Another question came in for you, Jill. Could my administrator contact these ladies, meaning you,
Sure.
and I guess we could put you in contact with them.
Perfect.
I don't know
Email
if
would be great.
Okay. Yeah, and we have the email, so I can share that. I will just put that out here for everybody that I will share the email if people want to contact you for information. Are there any plans for addressing mental health ratings for K through 2? How about picture ratings for students with special needs?
Yeah, and there is, and that's an excellent question. Right now, there are plans, of course. We're always trying to perfect, especially as we get into the lower levels, like K through 2. Right now, it's the parent teacher. And I should just really quickly, it's a separate system. So it's either parents and or teachers. And what they do is they get a link and they are independently rating the student or their child on up to 17 different behaviors. Now that's their observations, but it's pretty predictive. And so that's what we have now, but we're always trying to figure out how do we make sure that we can go lower and make sure we're valid. And that's the important thing. But for your picture ratings, that's exactly what we're working on right now. We do have that again through our emojis, but we can do better, especially for younger students. And so we're constantly perfecting the system. And these are great questions, by the way.
They are. Okay, I don't see any other questions right now. So I would like to thank all of you for joining us today, especially our panelists. Yes, we have a thank you from Janet Driscoll regarding the content. It was an excellent presentation and very interesting, something I knew very little about. So thank you all again, panelists, and thank you for those attending. Oh, someone has their hand up in the attendees. You can go ahead and ask your question in Q&A or in the chat. This is Maureen. So go ahead and type your question into the chat or into the Q&A window.
You could reach out to me directly since I'm on. And so that's my email. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. We have a list of contacts, school contacts that we're happy to provide for you. And to follow up what Jill was saying, every school, no matter how small, you have a team that's already assigned to you once you sign on. And that team is consisting of, unfortunately, me is kind of like the face, but behind that, we have at least 2 customer operations managers and our director of operations. And we also have another clinical person. That's what's supporting you. So if you ever have a question, our mandate is within 15 minutes, we get back to you, if not immediately. So that's what makes our customer satisfaction so high. We want to make sure we're addressing any questions you have in real time.
And I agree with Rich. I had a situation where, not even related to this test, this assessment, I had a child whose parents knew that he was really suffering, and they just couldn't find a good local child counselor, and he provided me with some suggestions for that. So anytime, I'm telling you, Rich reaches out within 15 minutes most times. It's great. It's awesome.
And you do want someone to hold your hand that first time, because it's almost like you give the assessment and then you just hold your breath. and then after you give it that first time, you roll with it. But the very first time you do it, you just hold your breath, see, okay, what are the results going to be? And am I going to be able to, manage through all this? Because there's a lot of phone, I don't want to say a lot, but you do some phone calling and dialoguing. But after that, I think there's just kind of like, okay,
Got this.
because you feel equipped.
Well, thank you again. And just want to mention, as Rich did at the beginning of the presentation, the NCEA convention, which will be taking place in New Orleans, April 19th through the 21st. And if you want information on that, you can go to ncea.org/NCEA 2022. And anything in closing that you wanted to say, anything from our panelists?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for hosting us. We're honored, and we look forward to seeing you all in New Orleans.
Great. Okay, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars, and everyone have a happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.